And we'll start in a minute or two, see if anyone else joins, and then we'll kick it off. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to meeting number 2 for the Community Facilities Working Group. My name is Chris Rabasco. I'm a planning associate for Michael Baker International. If you attended meeting 1 for Community Utility, you may be wondering where my colleague Hannah Clark is, but tonight she is facilitating the resource protection meeting, so I'm here to fill in. We've been working together throughout this entire project along with township staff to help the township during phase 4 of their 2021 comprehensive plan update. Today's meeting number 2 will focus on information sourced from subject matter experts at Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. We're very happy to have them on with us tonight. Before we get started, we'll go around and do a quick round of intros so we all can get familiar with each other. I'll hand it first to some township staff. Dave Manhart.
Hi, Dave Manhart, Director of Community Development, former LVPC, so it's good to see all my former colleagues.
Great, and now for our subject matter experts, we'll start with Sue Rockwell.
Yes, hi, I'm Sue Rockwell, Senior Environmental Planner at the LVPC.
Jill.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jill Seitz, Senior Community Planner at LVPC.
And I forgot Robert, also from South Whitehall.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robert Emanuel, and I'm an intern at South Whitehall.
Great, thanks. And now we'll go to some residents that have joined. Bill McNair.
Hi, Bill McNair. I'm on the South Whitehall Township Planning Commission.
Al Tope.
I'm also on the South Whitehall Township Planning Commission.
Great, thanks for joining. Frank Cole.
Hi there, I'm a resident of the Vistas. I do not hold a position with any of those organizations, just a very interested resident. I happen to be on the HOA of the board here at the Vistas.
Great. Richard Bronstein.
Richard Bronstein, lived in South Carolina and
Great. Scott Savette. Scott, I think you're muted if you're there. We can maybe come back to you. I think we just had Herb join, Herb Bender from South Whitehall.
Yeah, that's correct. And I also have Mike Elias here with me also.
Okay, great. And I think lastly, we have Dell.
Hi, Del Markwood.
Great. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Before we get started, we'd like to quickly review some of our key takeaways from meeting 1. And we're going to discuss through some of them and prioritize to help us guide our discussion today. So in order to prioritize what we talked about last week, when I wasn't there, you talked through these things with Hannah. We're going to use a program called menti.com. So if everybody could open up either a new browser or on your phone, go to www.menti.com and type in, it'll prompt you to type in a code. You just type in 5633-2523. It's on the screen here for everyone to see. So I'll give everyone a second to navigate over there. Some of the key takeaways we identified through discussion last week are listed on the screen, and you'll be able to rank them 1 through 8. Once you type in the code, you'll be taken to a screen that looks like the one I have up right now. And for your first ranking, you're going to click the drop-down menu and select one of our key takeaways. Once you select one, a new drop-down will pop up for ranking number 2, and so on and so forth. Again, that's menti.com with the code 5633-2523.
And where do you type that in?
Once you go to menti.com, it should pop right up to prompting you to type in a code. Just for example, I'll try to show it here. If you just type in menti.com, it'll have a prompt here to please enter a code. So yours isn't showing up. Robert just put in the chat a link to menti.com if that works for you. And then you just type in the code and
I put the code in the chat as well, so you can just copy and paste it from there.
And once people start putting in some responses, we'll see them appear on the screen, and that'll help guide our discussion later on as we look towards identifying some initial recommendations. So I'll give everyone.
Chris, what were you looking at once we got in? What were you trying to do?
I was just showing what it looks like once you're signed in. It's the ranking of the key takeaways that are on my screen. This is just what it's going to appear as everyone starts ranking them. But when you're voting, this is what the screen looks like.
Okay, so we're voting for the ranking. Okay, I missed that part somehow. Got it.
Right. So, and once people put their votes in, this screen will start changing. Just a little activity to kick us off.
Looks like they changed the screen.
The color?
Yeah. So
yeah,
previous meetings, the Menti, it was hard to read. You had to hover over before you could see any of the options.
Right. So I was messing around with it today and just realized if the screen is white, for some reason the letters show up.
Okay.
So that got rid of that problem.
Good.
In some previous meetings. So far, we have in a vote for evaluating growth area designations. That would be evaluating what was designated from the 2009 plan. Some of the other key takeaways from last meeting that you'll be ranking are lack of service north of Huckleberry Ridge, developing broadband goals or recommendations, considering expansions for alternative utilities, maybe natural gas, working with developers for system expansions or to evaluate capacities, including maintenance or expansion projects on the capital improvements plan. And we'll give everyone another minute or so to see if we get some more responses, and then we'll jump into some of our items for today.
For me, it said the code doesn't work. I tried it a couple times and checked it, but something's not compatible.
Not sure. We can share these codes later if in case, or post them on the site if anyone would like to maybe put in input there, or feel free to drop something in the chat and we can add it in ourselves so that we at least collect the input that way. So far, evaluating growth area designations is still number one.
Hey, stop by Dunkin' Donuts.
And we'll do about 30 more seconds and then we can review and move on. So it looks like we've had 6 people vote, so I think that's a good turnout. And evaluating growth area designations turned out to be number one. Tied for second and third is the lack of service north of Huckleberry Ridge, and working with developers to help provide system expansions or to evaluate capacities. Fourth, developing broadband goals or recommendations. Fifth, natural gas or alternative utility expansions. Sixth, including maintenance or expansion projects on a capital improvements plan. Seventh, environmental impacts of areas that do not have access to sewer systems. And eighth, encouraging free market competition for utility services. So we thank everyone for participating in that activity. It'll help us prioritize as we move into the process of identifying some recommendations. With that, we're going to jump to our purpose here today. Meeting 2, which is to discuss information from subject matter experts with Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. And some of our goals for today are to review and discuss the data that they have sourced and provided for us today that they're going to discuss in a couple seconds here, to learn about the tools and best practices that they used for community utilities as they looked at developing future LV and some of their other plans and work that they've done over the last few years, and to help us identify initial recommendations to consider as we move towards the plan update. And our desired outcome today is to create a high-level list of initial recommendations that will be prioritized to start next week, and then we'll build them out as our final working group meeting the week of August 2nd. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Jill and Sue from LVPC.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So planning for community utilities is directly tied to land use planning. Land use plans need to consider the sewer and water needs of areas that are planned for growth, because you want to make sure that the utility infrastructure is available to serve it. In Future LV, the regional plan, it recognizes that with the action, match development intensity with sustainable infrastructure capacity. And that aligns pretty well with the township's guiding principle to coordinate future land use, development and redevelopment in sync with the capacity of the road network and utilities to absorb changes. So we have the general land use plan map from Future LV up on the screen. And in preparing that and to identify areas recommended for development, we began with where the existing public sewer service areas are located. To that, we added all the municipal approved developments that were proposing public sewers. And once we had those mapped, we added a 1/4 mile buffer around them to be considered as potential growth areas. Some of the areas, some of those areas within the buffer could be capable of accommodating additional developments, but also where preservation of agriculture or other rural uses could be more appropriate. And in those areas, they were designated as a preservation buffer, and those are the hatched areas on the map that you see. We then developed criteria to help in our review in-house of land development proposals in those preservation buffer areas. So as far as planning tools for sewage disposal facilities, Act 537, the Pennsylvania Sewage Facility Act, is the primary law controlling these facilities. And under Act 537, municipalities have to prepare and maintain an up-to-date sewage facilities plan that does a number of things. It has to identify the current and future sewer needs of the municipality. It needs to evaluate the functioning of existing facilities, identify any sewage disposal problems. It needs to evaluate alternatives to address those needs and problems. And these requirements apply to all systems, whether they're public sewer systems or on lot. Ultimately, municipalities are responsible for assuring the safe and reliable sewage disposal within their borders. So as part of preparing a comprehensive plan, the municipality's planning code also requires that the comprehensive plan include a plan for the reliable supply of water. And it looks at several things, the current and future water availability, uses and limitations, and also provisions to protect water supply sources. As far as stormwater tools, stormwater is managed through the Pennsylvania Stormwater Management Act, or Act 167, with the implementation of ordinances that are created at the county level, but are enforced by municipalities. And the township is divided into 3 watersheds: the Little Lehigh, Copley, and Jordan. There is a stormwater plan and ordinance prepared for each, and all have been adopted by the township. The purpose of the ordinance is to mitigate the storm runoff impacts associated with land development. It doesn't fix existing drainage problems. Another great tool related to stormwater management is the Green Infrastructure Guidelines. We recently prepared, it was a few years ago. Green infrastructure, you can think of it as all the natural resources in an area that include your parks, your open space, woodlands, wetlands, but it also applies to site design best management practices. And so those guidelines describe best practices for stormwater management that better mimic natural systems. The township must also comply with the EPA municipal, this is the MS4 program, municipal separate, I have to say this right, municipal separate storm sewer system permit program, a little tongue twister, to reduce pollutants that are discharged to streams by the storm sewers. And South Whitehall Township must comply with that permit. And there are also minimal control measures that the township has to implement as part of that permit, and that includes best management practices. Floodplain management in the township is enforced through the township's floodplain ordinance. With weather events becoming more severe, hazard mitigation planning is also an important tool for communities. The 2018 Lehigh Valley Hazard Mitigation Plan was prepared in partnership with all 62 municipalities and was adopted by all. And in that plan, flooding was identified as the #1 natural hazard in the Lehigh Valley. As part of that plan, all the municipalities had to identify actions to mitigate hazard impacts, and each municipality did include actions related to flooding. Hazard mitigation planning is a continuing effort, in that plans have to be updated every 5 years. So the next plan will need to be completed by 2023, and we hope we get all the municipalities participating in that as well. Another opportunity is, since the township is undergoing this current comp planning effort, like I said, it provides an opportunity to integrate hazard mitigation into the comprehensive plan, and that helps to guide development and infrastructure away from known hazard areas. And Jill, did you have anything you want to add?
Am I muted?
Oh, nope.
No, we can hear you.
Okay. The only thing I would just reiterate is the relationship between development and utility infrastructure can't be understated. Wherever you have utilities, your development is going to follow. So being really cautious about where your sewer and water is being extended to will really make a difference in terms of balancing development and preservation of open space. However, on the flip side of that, development can also outpace the expansion of utilities. So you don't want to be in a situation where you have a residential development that's all on lot sewer systems that are going to end up failing over the long term. So thinking of like really logically thinking about where everything is going to go based on the patterns of growth is really critical here.
Great. I think if that's it from our LVPC folks, maybe we could open it up to some Q&A from any of the residents that may have some direct questions or clarifying questions for our subject matter experts. Maybe anything that the township folks would have for them. So we'll open it up before we jump into our discussion later on.
This is Bill McNair. One question I have: Do we know what our allocation or a permitted number for sewage flow to City of Allentown?
I believe it's currently 3 million gallons a day.
And do we know how much we're using?
In the community utilities workbook, I think it said for 2019 it was I want to say 2.26 million gallons per day.
Okay, so we got like 750,000 gallons a day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anyone else? Questions for LVPC? If not, we can jump right into our discussion template. I'm going to quickly post a link to the Jamboard in the chat, and we'll quickly go over instructions before we get started. So if everyone uses the Jamboard Google link that I just put in to the chat, I'll share my screen again. And you'll come to a screen that looks like this. And our main function today is going to be found over on the left control panel. The fourth option down, it's called the sticky note function. And as we go through today, if you have something that you want to be discussed or chime into the discussion, all you need to do is click on that button, type in your response, and we'll be sure to get to it. If you're having trouble using the sticky note function, you can feel free to drop your comments in the chat, and we'll make sure to bring them up. And it's also just meant to be a tool to facilitate an open discussion. So if you'd rather just discuss your point, we'll be sure to capture it on our own and keep updated as we go. So our first discussion question here is, what is working well now in South Whitehall Township when it comes to community utilities? So any initial thoughts that you may have, it could be anything carrying over from meeting one, either any recent additions or expansions, updates to the current systems that were a success, any successful goals from the previous plan that we'd like to build on, anything along those lines. I'll give everyone a couple seconds to maybe post something or kick off the discussion, and we'll see where it takes us. We have a robust water supply system and a septic system working just fine. Is there any need to change according to rules? Would anyone like to expand upon that or comment on those?
Yeah, I can. The one that says my septic system is working just fine. Is there anything need to change according to rules? As of right now, no. If we were to run sanitary through that area, there is a ordinance out there where you could potentially have to hook up, or you'd still have to pay the fee for not hooking up. the minimum payment on the sewage.
Okay, so if that was my question, Bill McNair, and so it's just checking to see if that's going to happen someday.
I don't know where you live, Bill, so I can't answer that for you right off
Yeah.
the question. But I take it you're north of where we're at now?
Yes, I'm in between Orfield Middle School and Parkland High School, north of Huckleberry Ridge.
As of right now, we don't have any plans of coming up there. But if what the big question would have to come in first is, does the township want any pumping stations? Because in order to get it over the ridge to the gravity fed side, we would have to pump it. So that would be the first aspect of it before we could even start to run sewer mains up there.
And just to kind of piggyback on it, and Sue, I think, mentioned it a little bit, is if there are areas of the township that have a lot of failing septics, what are there regulations, or does the DEP step in and ask or force the township to connect those properties? Because I think Upper Milford had something, Milford had something similar where they had a bunch of failing septics and they were told to put in a system.
Well, you have to look at alternatives. You don't want to just automatically jump into connecting to a treatment plant because that could be a great expense. And, so you want to evaluate a variety of alternatives, looking at what you might be able to do on lot. Maybe you want to have more of a community system for those failing areas. But the rule is you can't pollute the waters of the Commonwealth, so you have to do something. Whether in the end it's connecting to a treatment plant or some other alternative. You can't just let that go. That has to be addressed.
And is that addressed in the 537 plan, where we look at identify potential areas that may be having issues in the near future?
Yeah, that is part of it. Yeah, you do have to look at the functioning of all the systems in the township, and that's typically done by doing an on-lot needs survey. So you would send out a survey to residents. There would also be some door-to-door visits and talking to residents about their system and trying to get some information. So yeah, that's all part of the Act 537 plan.
Just in general on lot systems, and anybody can chime in that may know the answer, is what's the longevity of them? How long do they typically last? And I know that's kind of a loaded question, but is it like
Yeah, I
50
don't know
years, or is it, once they're put in, and if they're put in well and maintained well, will they last forever?
Well, that's the question. That's the key question. It's really, yeah, if they're supposed to last a long time if they're installed correctly and if they're operated properly. And so educating residents on maintenance is pretty critical to that.
Yeah.
Some people don't realize that they even have one and they think they're on public. So it's one of those invisible things that it's there, but you don't really pay attention. So it tends to escape your mind on maintenance and such.
Yeah, Dave, you're 100% correct there. It does come down to the maintenance of them. If you keep them functioning, cleaning, keep the roots out of them, keep the baffles clean, they tend to last very, very long. If you don't do that, you can run into problems fairly quickly also.
And
Yeah, it's pumping and inspections are critical to that.
so some of the older sections of South Whitehall and other places, they use different technologies. So, is there a general guideline, like if septic systems before 1940,
70,
yeah, the 70s?
1972 was when the act went into
Okay.
place.
So in
Is
broad
there
general terms, if the septic was put in before 72, we may have issues.
eh, they're in an on-lot needs survey, they're generally categorized if they're working. I mean, they're generally categorized as a potential malfunction. It doesn't mean they're malfunctioning. It's just
Right.
because they were pre-1972 systems. I mean, they could be working okay and, no problems that anybody's aware of, but they're considered potential malfunctions,
Yeah.
basically.
I think we
We might
could,
be getting off topic here.
I
Sorry.
Yeah.
think we can try to maybe get back on topic by moving to our next question. If you go up to the top of your screen and hit the next frame arrow, you'll see what are the problem areas in South Whitehall Township for community utilities. I think this could maybe be a continuation of some of the septic discussions we're having just now, potential failures that may pop up. And in reviewing materials from meeting one, I think some of the potential problem areas would just be broadly ensuring that development growth follows utility growth or vice versa. Ensuring those two things are coordinated should be seemed like a big focus of last meeting. So if anyone has any input for problem areas that they want to make sure we consider as we start to look at initial recommendations. You have areas of potential septic failures again as a problem area.
That was me. I just put that in.
Yeah.
Just talking about that.
We have perception of municipal water supply. Would anyone like to expand on what they mean by that?
Yeah, that was me. I know we talked last time about the community I'm in. The perception here is that there was an issue. I know Herb addressed it in a conversation last time too, is that we can always tweak the volume of water that gets to our locations. But so it's just one of those things that kind of follows on from the last conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an issue? Could there be an issue the more that we develop?
Right. And I remember
Volume, yeah.
Dave said that there are, will serve letters in development proposals to help ensure that services can be provided for. I don't know if maybe LVPC would have any suggestions on how to maybe evaluate systems for capacity or how you work with the developers or to help increase a better perception of the water supply to avoid some of the problems that came up last week, specifically at the Vistas.
Well, this is kind of part of the reliable supply of water plan that is required by the MPC, and it's all about data, really. So, what is the yield of your well? What is the pump capacity of your well? And if you're in a higher elevation area that's getting water from a lower elevation area, you might need a booster pump station to pump that to increase the pressure. So those are the kinds of things that you would need to really look at to identify that, get that data.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on it, there's kind of two issues. There's the will serve and having adequate allocation for, normal day-to-day operations. And then there's also the question of fire flows. So if, a lot of the new warehouses and, sprinklered areas, typically they have a lot of volume that goes through those. And paying attention to that flow rate is also an important piece of it. I know, a previous location I was involved with the water utility, and the fire departments knew basically the capacity of every fire hydrant out there, and knew which ones to tap into to get the proper flows. So that's an important piece that also needs to be managed.
We have Dell in the chat wondering how many municipal wells and service tanks are in the system. And just our ability to add more as needed. I don't know if you would know, Dave, off the top of your head.
I think there's 9 or 10.
Okay.
And I believe there's 2 storage facilities.
Dave, do you want to go into numbers or just roundabout?
Just roundabout. I mean, the other piece of it is, we have municipal wells, and then we also have interconnects. But yeah, you can certainly go into a little bit more detail on there.
Yeah, we have actually three storage tanks. We have about 11 or 12 wells, which is correct. And we also have 2 interconnects with LCA that we can use. And a third one, we're working on getting the testing worked out.
And, with the comment at the end of that, more can be added as needed. As with most infrastructure projects, or I don't know if it's most or probably a significant portion of them, the infrastructure projects and improvements oftentimes are related to development. So if a development goes in and they need more fire flow, oftentimes they're responsible for providing that fire flow. Or if they need water main extension and they need additional gallonage, they may be required to put a new well in. So a lot of times that is tied to development. Not to say that the municipality and the utility can't do projects, and we're doing improvement projects all the time. So Herb can probably jump in, and a lot of times they're focusing on efficiency, and maybe not as much of capacity. But typically the focus is efficiency and maintenance, which kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah, Dave, the way you explained it is perfect. That's exactly what we look for, the efficiency, the maintenance of it. We have to make sure everything will be up to code and everything to make sure it's feasible.
Before we move on, there's a comment here on capital broadband issues and the lack of choice of suppliers. I think that came up a couple times last week, and not only just broadband, but lack of utility choices for other newer utilities such as natural gas. There's a lack of MPC guidelines since it's been a while since that guidance has been updated. If anyone would like to expand on why they think that's a problem area, or any comments from our SMEs to plan for some newer utilities.
This is Bill. I did write the comment. Our cable in this area, again, it's north of the ridge, goes out periodically, and they seem to know where it is. But during storms and stuff, the cable goes out, and it's sometimes unreliable. And we really don't have any choice in the matter. I don't know if there'd be a way of just, if there's a way of, nobody really knows other than the cable company, Service Electric where we are, is, if there's a problem, because I don't think it gets reported outside.
Yeah, addressing the cable internet utility issues is a tough one because then you're getting into they're more like customer based utilities, right? So they kind of go where the customers are. I do think that South Whitehall Township being right adjacent to Allentown may have opportunities for expanding more service providers. It's difficult also to tell where exactly the service is being provided because the providers don't like showing exactly where their service areas are. So your best data for that is the census does report on people who say they have different types of internet, but it doesn't exactly tell you where the actual service is. But we can talk more about potential opportunities for incorporating recommendations in the plan.
And one of the things that municipalities do have, and I don't know the exact terminology, but there are, and I think it's cable TV agreements. So a municipality will have an agreement with different providers to allow access into their municipality. I don't know exactly what South Whitehall has, and I don't know if it's only references cable or if it's broadband or how it's structured or how it's worded. But typically municipalities will have something like that. And that may be tied to FCC guidelines. But again, it's kind of, I don't know a whole lot of information on it. I know it's out there. It may be something that we could look into a little bit more.
Dave, if I may add a little bit, at least in the part of South Whitehall from basically Walford Avenue South, there are two cable providers, Service Electric and what is it?
RCN.
Oh,
RCN.
Yeah.
RCN. And I know where I live, when we moved in, we had a choice of either using either one. And in my old house, we also had a choice of either one. So, some choice does exist. People, I know people who like RCN much better than Service Electric and vice versa. It's kind of like chocolate and vanilla. You take your pick. Or strawberry for somebody, I guess. Then you go with the dish.
Yeah. And to Jill's point, it's kind of, you're at the mercy of those providers and those utilities, and they're in the business to make money.
That's right.
They're going to locate where they can get the most customers, and they'll balance the infrastructure to run the lines or pipes based on the number of customers that they can get online. So it's kind of market driven.
Utilities do not come under the purview of the State Public Utility Commission. Whatever regulation there is federal, which can be more lenient than the state.
One of the things that came up last time, and I know we have a broader audience this week from the folks in the Planning Commission, is we talked about utilities in terms of, and broadband in terms of the future, because this is all about planning for the next 10 years, right? So the concept of, and I know I brought up 5G, which is the promise coming from so many different mobile vendors, is so if you're planning for that, because it's a different tower than a traditional cell tower, I think. So what's it going to look like in 3 years? 5G might be 12G for all I know. I have no idea, but it's something we need to think about because those could be tiny little boxes by the time we get to 2030. I don't know.
Mm.
So that's the question for the future is what's that going to look like? I mean, maybe that just takes away the whole idea of this cable internet stuff. Because as time goes on, we're gonna be depending on these little tiny boxes that are all over the place.
Right.
Sure. That plus also more and more wireless phone companies are offering in-home Wi-Fi services through, I guess, satellite. So that might eliminate the need to lay cable too.
Yeah, so that's futuristic for sure.
And I know in planning circles, there's been a lot of documentation about, I think they call them small cell, which is the smaller towers and antennas that typically get, it's basically a box on a telephone pole is what it amounts to. And I think they've been looking to get into the township, but I again, it's kind of, I'm not exactly sure where it stands. But it's certainly coming, and the companies are wanting to expand and get as many people on it as they can. And again, looking to that to incorporate it in the plan, and planning for the future makes total sense.
Mhm.
Dave, is the township working on a 5G ordinance at this point in time?
Not an ordinance, I don't think. I know there's been talk, and I haven't been involved in it, so I don't know exactly where it stands, but there's been talk about 5G. And again, I would have to do some digging to find out where it is.
Because it would seem to me that, some of the municipalities, I think Allentown City and maybe Upper Macungie have generated those already. And maybe,
and I think,
given our population density, maybe we shouldn't be too far behind in that.
yeah, and maybe, that is something we should put in the recommendation to look at a 5G or whatever the terminology is, small cell.
Currently, the word today is 5G.
Right.
We
what said,
should probably have an ordinance of that sort. I'd hate to see the carriers come in and say, "Oh, you have no ordinance.
We can do whatever we want.
And we're going to put it here, whether you like it or not."
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it ties to, because they often locate on telephone poles, they're located in the right of way.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of hurdle that we have to look at. But, like someone said, it could turn into 12G.
Right.
So we have to figure out how to.
We will.
phrase it. Yeah, I'm sure it will.
Mhm.
It'll be
one of these days, and I have no idea when. I mean, I got to think that the optimum is direct connection between your cell phone and the satellite. No wires, no nothing, just a receiver. But I think that's a few years away. I can see technical problems for that, but
it'll just be an implant at some point.
well,
Put it in the back of your head.
step.
Right.
So I know we've gotten off topic a little bit, but circling back to the agreements that cable companies have with municipalities, I'm looking at my Service Electric cable TV bill, and there is a franchise fee.
Yes,
And
there is.
they claim that that is a fee paid to municipality to allow the use of public streets and right-of-ways to operate a cable television system within that municipality.
Yeah, it's the franchise. That's right.
And Service Electric does pay that to South Whitehall.
It's a franchise agreement.
Yep.
And so what I heard, an RCN would also pay that for customers that are on their network as well, correct?
That's my understanding, that RCN also pays that.
And then I think it's a question of how you open that up to additional, I don't know if it's revisited yearly or it's every 5 year or a 10-year agreement.
I don't know.
Agreement.
Any other quick thoughts on broadband before we maybe touch on a couple other problem areas that came up at the last meeting that I want to make sure we devote some time to? And those would be just whether or not there are any specific areas that might be seeing development pressures or pressures on the existing utility systems, whether it be sewer or water. I know there's also concerns of maintenance costs that are that the municipality is left to pay, and potential problems with funding. You know, most of the funding has to go towards maintenance, so a lot of times expansion isn't even a thought because the township, you know, can't afford it. I don't know if anyone wants to expand on anything like that from last week, or if the SMEs have any thoughts on ways to either alleviate pressures on the systems or to alleviate funding pressures by maybe working with developers. So I'll open it up to those topics.
Yeah, I mean, sure, working with developers is, you know, to help fund these things is a great opportunity. There's always going to be maintenance costs. I mean, this is the part of, but this is part of the service. So those costs are always going to go up. You know, you need to costs of materials and equipment go up, and you know, the systems are aging, and so those costs are going to go up, and you know, that's just unfortunately that's just part of the part of the service.
I think we could then maybe just segue into, to continue on what we're talking about now, tools or best practices relevant to addressing some of these problems, like high maintenance costs, like a lack of broadband choices. Anything else that immediately would jump up to help alleviate some of these problems? Maybe strategies for a new topic would be identifying or evaluating our current growth areas, things that maybe you guys look to in developing future LV, maybe any certain metrics that went into designating areas as prime for growth could be relevant to the township as we start to build recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, as I had mentioned earlier, you know, we extended that buffer around the sewer service areas, the existing, and you know, where the logical extension of the infrastructure could occur, but also considering that there might be other types of uses that would be better or more appropriate there. You know, so looking at farmland preservation, you know, and natural resources. Those are usually the first things that come off the top as far as developing the land use plan. You know, what are the important things to preserve, and then looking at, you know, where you might extend the growth areas based on the existing infrastructure.
So just to piggyback on that layering approach, and so people know, and I apologize if I covered this at the first meeting, but the end result of this exercise is these recommendations go to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will have workshops to evaluate the recommendations and kind of put them all together and layer them, and eventually come up with a land use plan that will identify growth areas. So it's a piece of the puzzle, and we take all this information from all the working groups and kind of put it all together into a future land use plan. just to give everybody kind of the end goal on where we're heading and why we're going through this process.
I have one more. I don't know if it's a problem, just a question. I think in the LVPC, future LV, there was a comment that packaged wastewater treatment plants are not favored, I guess. And I was wondering why. There's at least one in the South Whitehall with at the high school, and there may be others. I'm not sure about that. I don't know if Herb knows if there's any additional ones. Or does South Whitehall do anything with those, or are they operated by the owners? And are those potential problems? And I'm not sure why they're problems. I don't know if
Yes,
you all...
they are potential problems.
Yeah, historically, those kinds of facilities are put in to allow for more denser development, basically. And so then they get put in and the owner walks away, and maintenance of those facilities is not as great. Usually it's more with privately owned, because publicly owned systems, they're not going to walk away. So the school district, at least, they have every reason to keep that functioning. So that's why we had that comment or that action in there. It was just like based on historic things that have happened with facilities like that in the past. So
we've had one come before the Planning Commission recently in the BOC is the Purina treatment plant. So that's a privately owned package plant, and they have to upgrade it, and the capital costs involved with upgrading plants is not insignificant. So a lot of times these private systems will try and keep it running as best they can without investing the huge capital costs typically involved with them, to make the upgrades to get them up to standards.
Now Purina is an industrial waste, or waste treatment. It's a little more than a package. I'm thinking of the package one more for municipal waste.
Yeah, that was that action is
yes,
for sewer.
Yep.
System.
Are there any? Does anybody know if there are more than just one in South Whitehall, or the one at the high school and Purina? But are there any others anywhere?
Is the school board have the there's one by the Orfield, the middle school is, I guess.
I think.
Right.
Yeah, I think we have that listed as a.
Okay.
Another.
So there's one there.
So the new
system,
high school goes into the old high school plant.
Okay. I don't know if there's one in Pheasant Hills or not.
No, we do not.
Not that I know of.
Yeah, I don't know of any up there neither, Bill.
Okay.
No,
are there any others anywhere else?
Living in Pheasant Hills, I can tell you there's not.
I don't believe so, Bill. I think those are the only ones.
Okay. So maybe the fact that they're being run by the school district gives you a little more confidence. I know I worked with some. Air Products had some. That was a way they treated sanitary waste at some of their chemical plant facilities. Seemed to work.
How it works is with those, they have to report directly to DEP. So they still have to be in compliance with DEP and everything. It just takes the township out of it. We don't do anything with them. They are solely with DEP, and they have to deal directly with them.
Okay.
It's Dell. Just so you know, the school district has indicated that their systems are working okay today, but they would really like to tie into a public system. But obviously, it doesn't exist at this moment near the school district, near the Parkland School.
Okay.
they'd like to offload the responsibility of the maintenance of it.
I think that's a common theme is most people in the sewer business want to get out of the sewer business.
Correct.
Getting back to some of the other things we had pop up here, Al in the chat suggests shorter review periods to allow for more corrections as needed. Also, one of the first comments for tools was green infrastructure guidelines for stormwater. And I know that came up previously, perhaps developing a plan similar to one that LVPC actually developed for Monocacy Creek. I believe, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but I think it's an Act 157 plan. I don't know if Dave could talk if there are plans for that, or if LVPC would like to maybe touch on some of the benefits for that type of planning.
Sure, that's the Stormwater Management Act, Act 167. We worked with the municipalities in the Monocacy Creek watershed to update their stormwater plan, and as part of that, we developed the green infrastructure guidelines, and that was incorporated in their ordinance. So that's now in effect, and it's been in effect for a few years now. So we see as land development reviews come in for that area, they have to comply with those provisions. That's certainly something that could be done now. You don't need to have a complete upgrade of your stormwater plans. If you're really interested in those provisions, you could certainly update that on your own. You don't have to wait until that ordinance is updated as far as that goes, as far as implementing best practices.
And another comment here that I put in, building off of last week, was some discussion around a capital improvements plan. Does the township currently have one in place that would maybe help plan out into the future so that some of these bigger projects could be laid out in a more particular manner?
I don't know that we do have one. If we do, I'm not aware of it, and or we may have it one time or something, but I'm not certain.
Yeah, Dave, I know for the water and sewer, we have a CapEx plan that we revise and everything due to the nature of something starts to fail before it might be later. We move it around a little bit. We do have a plan that is laid out. We keep track of which ones we have done already and everything. But right now we are planned out to, if I'm taking this off the top of my head, I was just working on it last night. I think we are all the way out to 2026 or 2027.
Sorry.
No, it sounds like something we could reference or at least somehow incorporate.
Right. Yeah, in a broad sense, in some form of recommendation. I was also going to touch on maybe more specific. I mean, the green infrastructure guidelines could help for some of the more preservation aspects, but maybe people could expand on how preservation or conservation efforts could benefit the utility system, and how that's a tool to protect some of the systems.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's all part of green infrastructure, protecting the natural resources, and the benefits of that. We did a return on investment report for the Lehigh Valley that looks into just that. You know, what are the benefits of natural systems? You know, the flood mitigation. You know, stormwater management, water quality, all those things. So and for free, so you don't have to spend a ton of money and you get all those benefits, you know, millions of dollars in benefit for just maintaining natural systems. And even the green infrastructure practices, you know, part of that is minimizing disturbed areas and reducing impervious cover, and you know, preserving those natural resources that are on the site, so that they can help in providing those benefits. So that, you know, that's a really important tool.
I just before this meeting, I saw, just looking through some of the materials on LVPC's website, there's a Jordan Creek watershed water quality assessment. I don't know if maybe there is some plan for the township to have its own green infrastructure plan to maybe help some of those efforts, or if there's been any impact studies done similar to the one on the Jordan Creek watershed that was already completed.
Oh boy, that goes back a ways.
Right. If you don't know, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what that involved. I don't believe it was a green infrastructure type report. Okay. But yeah, I apologize. That goes back a ways. Now I'm gonna have to look into that.
Yeah.
I'll have to look into that.
And lastly, any tools for the township to help manage some of the private systems? I know they sometimes have worries over what power they do have, how they could maybe leverage any relationships with DEP to help with some private improvements. And not just LVPC, if any township staff has comments on that, then we can move on to building some of the recommendations.
I know one of the concerns, and this might be targeted at Mike, is stormwater management. I believe the township is on the hook for those private systems. So there's certain things that we need to look at with regards to these private systems to make sure they're functioning, because ultimately we're the ones that I believe we have a permit. So if there's any guidance from LVPC on how a municipality can work with a private stormwater system.
Yeah, Dave, we are correct. This is Mike Elias. Sorry, guys. Any private BMP that's installed, once the project is done and turned back over to the township, the private BMP could be in someone's backyard. We'd have to follow the maintenance schedule and the inspection schedule, which on a lot of them is, for the first 2 years, it's every year, and then it's 3 year. It goes on 3-year cycles, and we have to determine how to inspect that. And technically, the homeowner or the property owner would be available, or I'm just not available, but on the hook to get us inspection records and turn it back over to the township every 3 years.
Yeah, so has the LVPC seen how other municipalities are kind of handling that requirement?
No, not that I know of.
How many of those do we have that are private owners?
A lot.
Yeah. So I mean, the when BMPs could be as small as a rain garden in the backyard, and that during the development process, land development process, they'll talk about stormwater management. In some projects, every parcel will have a BMP on it. rain garden, amended soil, vegetated soil. There's a list of them. So we have, and I don't know which, I can think of the development out by Blue Barn that every lot has one. So it kind of becomes a management nightmare because there's so many out there.
Is the township responsible?
Ultimately,
Yes.
Should we make an inventory?
we have.
Yeah, we have an inventory that we currently add to. The difficulty is usually with the homeowners that don't know that they have this on lot. And what happens is I have a lot of permits here with the township as well. And when zoning would get in a permit for, say, a swimming pool, and this is one that happened right after I started here. The yard was had amended soils, it had a rain garden, and the homeowner had no idea that it was on their lot. So it was news to them when we said, "I'm sorry, you can't put a pool in that location." They indicated that they would have purchased a different lot. So I don't think it's being disclosed, and if it is, it's in that stack of paperwork you sign, when you're buying, I mean, it's kind of confusing, and it's frustrating for the homeowner. Big business is different. The concern part is the homeowners for me.
Uh-huh. Okay.
All right. So I think we'll utilize the last 15 to 20 minutes. I know there's I believe a BOC meeting coming up. So I want to make sure we have time to call out some initial recommendations based on everything we've discussed so far. So if anyone has any just broad suggestions, these will be prioritized and built out at the next meeting. But we just want to make sure nothing gets lost from our discussion today. You can either drop them in the chat or say them out loud, and I'll be sure to capture them here. Or if you're still using the sticky note, you can go ahead and do that, and we'll discuss any that come up.
One that we haven't discussed completely, and it's a question, would be what are we going to do north of Huckleberry Ridge with sewer? We discussed that more at the last meeting. I think be making a plan, developing a plan, or deciding that one's not needed, depending on what happens there.
Yes. One of the pieces of that is, we'll be layering in all the recommendations. And those growth areas kind of become a function of the future land use plan. So I think, from a general perspective, the recommendations that come out of the utility working group, I don't know that we as a group need to focus on the specifics of sewer that area or not sewer that area, but look at broader recommendations that look at, address or evaluate older areas with older septic systems, and how to manage those aging systems. Because some of those, frankly, are north of the ridge, and may become issues in the not too recent near future. So those are things to think about. And definitely at the Planning Commission, we'll be looking at, what growth areas this comp plan is going to recommend. And we talked about the 5, and I always mess it up, 537 plan. The other idea of this comp plan and moving into the 537 plan is this plan will hopefully provide guidance and information for that 537 plan so that we can coordinate the two. You know, a 537 plan done on its own may not be consistent with a comprehensive plan. So marrying those two is super important. And one of the reasons we put the hold on the 537 plan until this process got underway and at least to kind of some of these recommendations so that we have a better idea of what this comp plan is going to recommend.
Okay, good.
There's a question about PPL and UGI in the land use plan. Again, those utilities typically will follow development because they're customer driven. You know, they're going to go where it makes sense for them to go, where they're going to make the money going. So I could see PPL, UGI going areas that there's the density to serve. So if there's a new area with high density, UGI is going to say, if I run this mile of gas line, I'm going to get 1,000 more customers that, you know, their balance sheet works in that case. So they're going to look at, you know, the cost to make the extension compared to the number of customers they could potentially get.
A question there. Electric power, of course, I guess a question with gas is that, you know, with climate change, is that something that should be maybe not encouraged? And I'm not saying I know the answer, but
one of the things we haven't talked about, and you just kind of triggered it, is green energy, you know, solar, wind, being it, you know, geothermal, and, you know, all these green alternative energies are a topic that, you know, I think we should address at some point and look at the potentials for, I mean, it's a huge topic and there's all kinds of stuff that can be discussed, and, you know, the concept of a microgrid that's, you know, primarily powered by alternative energy and backed up by the utility. And so there's a lot of opportunity to get incorporated into this plan with regards to green energy. Most of I don't know that the South Whitehall is a good opportunity for wind, but solar is definitely an option with regards to green energy.
Any thoughts from maybe the LVPC on green energy in the township or other areas in Lehigh Valley that could be useful for the township to keep in mind as examples?
Was there a?
Nope, I think Jill is muted.
I can't think of any municipal examples where they have something in their ordinances already, but just incentivizing green building in zoning ordinances and Saldo. I don't know of any that are already doing it. Sometimes a developer will just do it because it's something that they care about. But I'll think about it.
Was there a plan? There was a green energy plan, or I think it was part of the 1LV.
Oh, climate and energy. Yes.
Climate and energy.
Yes. We have a number of policies and actions related to climate, energy, and green building is definitely part of that.
What's that called again? So that
The climate and energy element.
Okay.
It was 2014.
we doing here, Chris? Is this the last slide?
Yeah, this is the last one. I know we're coming up on the OC meeting. So I think if there are any last comments from anyone that they would like to expand or react to, make sure you get them in while we have the LVPC folks to bounce things off of.
And I'm just gonna probably start backing up and heading over to the BOC room so that I can get set up. Thank you to everybody for taking the time. South Whitehall Township residents. This is an important part, and it's definitely the time to get involved. So one thing that we're also trying to do is thank you for you being involved, but you know, these working groups, we still want to get as many people involved. So if you have friends or somebody that might be interested, if they didn't make the first 2 meetings, encourage them to come to the 3rd meeting, so that we can get some more input. So thank you. And then thank you to LVPC for taking time to share some of your knowledge and experience, definitely helping moving these plans forward. So thank you, everyone.
So one thing that we just touched on about, you know, green energy and its potential, geothermal especially, you know, it requires a decent footprint on your lot. And if I have I don't have a choice about whether to have a septic field. So it's kind of a mutually exclusive decision. We faced this not too long ago when our heat pump went, and I would have loved to do geothermal. And I know that you can do it other ways. You can bore down instead of across. But I just want to bring it to everybody's attention that pretty much north of the Huckleberry Ridge, you're not going to find much geothermal unless people have like a 3-acre lot, just because you're space constrained.
Right. And I think, you know, the comp plan and or any policy documents is just to kind of explain the pluses and minuses of different options, and, you know, the geothermal and ground source heat pump, and, you know, the, like I said, pluses and minuses. There's, you know, size constraints and lot area constraints, and, you know, often conflicts with septic. So I think putting the options out there is an important piece of it, so that people are aware that it potentially might work or it might be available, is kind of the goal.
Thank you.
So I am going to pack up. Thank you, everyone. I'm heading over a little early because I think I have to hook. I'm running the slideshow tonight. So I have to hook my laptop up. So
have fun.
Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
Dave.
Dave.
Thank
See
you.
you, Dave. So before we wrap up, anything, I know there's a lot on the screen right now, anything that we want to make sure that we carry over, anything that we've maybe discussed in either meeting that we don't see here, because these are going to be the things that likely we spend time on 2 weeks from now to build out. I think this is a pretty good summation. People can react to anything or further expand, further advocate for something as to why it's an important recommendation. Any final tips from LVPC as we look to actually building out some plans? Anything else before we wrap up?
I think it's just about balance. All of these elements are interrelated, and understanding those interrelationships, and you know, that balance to maintain the high quality of life that you want. I don't know if Jill has anything she'd like to add, but I think balance is a key to all of this.
Definitely agree. I dropped in 2 recommendations related to internet, high speed capacity and 5G. really they focus on what the township is able to do in its capacity to follow the technologies as they emerge and how to allow for those technologies, as we talked about with 5G. And then to inventory where high-speed internet is available now throughout the township in public spaces, because if providing high-speed internet in public facilities is a priority for the township, then the residents will benefit from that too, and they'll see like a greater chance of increasing the connectivity and capacity. So,
Right. I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. It's come up a couple times, and it sounds like there may need to be just some sort of planning and adjustments to allow, like you said, more options to come into the township. So I think we could wrap it up unless anyone has any objections or final thoughts they want to throw in on once.
Okay.
Nope. So just quickly, the last minute here as we close out, I just want to remind everyone that all of this information, the meeting recording, these Jamboard responses will all be available on the Community Utilities webpage, which you can access through the township website. If you ran out of time to discuss anything that you feel is relevant, or you just happen to remember something tomorrow, you can come and click on Working Group Meeting 2, and that'll take you to Google form where you can fill out the same questions that we've just reviewed, and you can add anything. Just make sure you click on Community Utilities so we know which topic you're referring to. And a quick reminder that our next meeting for this group will be Monday, August 2nd from 6 to 7:30. That'll again be a virtual meeting where we're going to take the time to build out some key goals, key stakeholders, funding sources to help build out some of these recommendations. So with that, again, I'd like to thank our SMEs from LVPC for helping us talk through some of these recommendations. It'll be a big help, and they have given us a lot to consider. Some of their plans that we mentioned in the chat will also go onto the subpage online for people to explore further. So again, I'd like to thank them for helping us out today, and thanks to all the residents for all their valued input. We always appreciate it. And we'll hopefully see you for meeting 3 again. We encourage any participation we can get. So if you do have anyone else that you think would benefit from joining the discussion, be sure to let them know. And feel free to follow up with any of us on any questions. Our contact information is included in the workbook. So with that, I'll wish everyone a good night and good luck at the BOC meeting if that's where you're headed.
Okay. Thanks for facilitating, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Take care.
Good night.
Bye.
All right.